Less than zero. Clay is coming home on vacation, home to Beverly Hills, home to his two closest friends, home to the beautiful and the out of control. When you're young and rich in Beverly Hills, the fun can last all night, the night can last all day, and the scars can last a lifetime. Welcome to Cover Your Eyes. Today we're talking about Less Than Zero. Hey, Holly Oliver.
Hi, Sarah Devereaux. What do you think about this movie?
Well, to be honest, I had actually never seen this movie as a kid, but I always wanted to, so I was kind of excited to get the chance to see it. So that I really liked it, and I knew that it was about drugs and things going wrong in young people's lives, but I didn't really know the depths that they sunk to, because knowing that Andrew McCarthy was in it, I thought it would still be kind of lighthearted, but it wasn't. So, I mean, the main things that I got from this movie are basically, I think it was a good message of don't do drugs, which was huge with the war on drugs in the 80s. I'm not sure it worked, but I think this movie would try to help support that idea. Money can't buy you happiness. I mean, all of these kids are so rich, they have everything in the world they could ever want, but that doesn't mean that they're happy. They're actually quite unhappy, most of them. So the three main characters, Julian, who's Robert Downey Jr., Blair, Jamie Gertz, and then Clay Easton, who's Andrew McCarthy. They all are kind of unhappy in their own ways.
I saw this movie when I was like, let's see, so it came out in like 87 or 88.
Yeah, 87.
So I know I saw it on cable and I snuck and watched it because Andrew McCarthy is my all-time crush from when I was little.
Yeah.
I saw him in Pretty in Pink, and I just like watched Pretty in Pink over and over again and like drooled and was like, I cannot wait until I'm a teenager and I can find somebody that looks like Andrew or that's like Andrew McCarthy.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to see this movie really super bad. This was one where it was like my mom was like, absolutely not.
Wow.
The whole thing is just high melodrama, lots of drugs. Sex and drugs are the themes of the movie. So, and they advertise that. So she didn't want me to see it. And then I was thinking about when I was watching it earlier, I was like remembering sneaking and watching it and being really disappointed. This is like really depressing, and I don't want to see my fake childhood boyfriend, Andrew McCarthy, get tortured.
I was like, whoa, because I mean, in the 80s, it's like, yeah, everyone snorts Coke, whatever. You go into the bathroom and someone's going to offer you some Coke. But then, like, to take it to the next level of crack is like Robert Downey Jr. or Julian's just like in this club, and then he basically leans out a window and lights up a crack pipe. I was like, dang.
Yeah. Okay. Every time he sucked on the crack pipe, it looked like it was the only thing left in his life. We have Clay and Blair, who are girlfriend and boyfriend, and they are going to be going off to school together out in the New England. And then Julian is going to be a record producer with his own record label that his dad gave him for graduation present. And so he's going to stay in LA. And then there's Rip, who is a drug dealer, and he's played by James Spader, of course.
Yeah.
Because James Spader plays the same variation of the like arch enemy in every like teen movie.
He does. In the 80s. He's good at it, though.
He's so good at it.
He's so good at it. I gotta say, like, I I've never been like a huge James Spader fan, but I feel like he was doing it for me in this movie. He had like the short hair,
Mm,
and I don't know. I was just like, oh, he's looking good in this movie. Aside from being like a drug dealer, his looks were doing it for me. He was kind of giving me like a Jude Law vibe. I don't know
mm,
why. And Jude Law is like my from way back. He's
mm.
my huge crush. And he was kind of reminding me of him. But yeah, James Spader, I like him in this movie. And then I think about the blacklist and then I just get depressed and I can't. I stop.
Like the character he plays in this movie, he's a sex trafficker.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
in the real sense of sex trafficking, like not fake, sex trafficking, like not QAnon sex trafficking rhetoric, but actual sex trafficking. The three of them are at graduation and they're taking pictures and they have champagne bottles that they're drinking out of at the school. And I was like, I felt like that was a really good way to indicate their financial status.
Yeah, they're drinking Dom Perignon out of the bottle. Each have their own bottle.
And no one is going to say anything to them about it because their parents are important. So we have that. So that kind of, to me, that set the scene for what was to come because it's already really obvious that their parents have a very hands-off approach. And to the extent that Blair's dad, you never really see him. He can't make it to her graduation. And then whenever she stops by his house later, he doesn't even come outside his bedroom door to like say thank you for the Christmas present. She left him. That made it easier for me to have sympathy for her. I didn't like her in this movie when I was a kid because she rejected Andrew McCarthy, so I thought she was a total moron. And I was just like, I can't with this woman.
She's crazy.
Blair ends up staying in LA to model and to party. She ends up hooking up with Julian, of course, because he's there too. And they're both doing coke together and partying all the time. While Clay is in New England in college, moving on and like deciding he's going to grow into a person and not just like be a party. They're party monsters. They're teenagers who have less than great supervision from their parents. And then their parents go, well, I'll just throw money at them and get them whatever they want. And then I don't have to pay attention to them. And then they go out into the world seeking attention. And then they get preyed upon by people like Rip because they're vulnerable. Clay's not, though. Clay's not really, he doesn't seem vulnerable in that way. And you notice like his family is there.
Yeah, his family's there more than the other families, especially for an 80s movie. Like, that's one of the things I noticed about the movie too is the like parental absence. The parental absence theme continues through this movie, which we've seen in several of the other movies. Clay, when he first comes home, like for Christmas, and he's like, Mom, and she's not there, but she was at his graduation. So Clay's parents are divorced, and it's seemingly from another woman causing problems. And his dad had an affair, it seems like. So, but his mom and dad both come to his graduation, and they're both there for Christmas dinner because they're like, we're going to just put our differences aside enough to be there for the important moments for Clay. So, yeah, that made a huge difference in his life, it seems like. We find out later that Julian's mom died when he was 5. So that caused like a trauma for him and also an absence throughout his life. And who knows how his dad handled it then. So it seems like his dad was there for him.
Yes.
even people who have wonderful families, because I know people who have wonderful families who are very supportive and give them every advantage they could possibly have. And still, there's just something emotionally or some trauma they've been through emotionally, or even like a physiologic chemical imbalance or something that's in them. And they are just feeling this need to like self medicate and they turn to drugs. So certainly like not having a good family system doesn't automatically mean you're going to do drugs,
Oh,
but
of
it
course
makes you
not.
less likely. But then there are people with wonderful family support systems who still do it because there's just different factors in everyone's life that it can't
Totally.
be boiled down to like formulaic
No,
reasons.
no.
And that's what happened with Julian because his dad, tried and then he says, I sent you to rehab and you talked your way out of it. And we've done this 100 times. So you can see like what we first see in the movie is Julian's dad rejecting him and being like, get out of here. I don't want you here if you're on drugs. And then later we find out like they've been through this many, many times before. So his dad's just not abandoning him and giving up on him. He's just
No.
can't stand to go through this cycle anymore. And it's damaged the rest of his family.
So there's also lots of people who have horrible, horrible childhoods who never do drugs,
Right.
So, I mean, like you're saying, it's completely variable. However, I do have a theory about Julian
I want to hear it.
and what happened to Julian. So here's my backstory for Julian. His uncle that he goes to visit
Oh my God.
in the car dealership, his uncle deals really fancy, expensive cars. Not a used car salesman, even though he's very slick. And he is sitting in the car with Julian, and Julian is trying to get money because he owes $50,000 to Rip because he's been quote unquote dealing drugs, but really that just means he's been getting fronted drugs that he's been doing himself.
Yeah.
Uh, he's asking for money and he's like, I'm investing in this club and it's really great. And his uncle's like, you know what? Let's go do a bump of coke and we'll talk about it. And there's something about the way that scene was played that I felt like the underlying tone of it was that his uncle had treated him inappropriately sexually in some way. Now, that doesn't necessarily even mean like that it was full on like sexual assault. It could have also been putting him in really inappropriate sexual situations at a younger age or treating him like a buddy and like maybe even hiring him a sex worker for his 14th birthday or something really fucked up that men think, that a lot of like older men could have thought like was a bonding experience and that like they don't even realize to themselves that like that's causing harm. So it could have been something like that, but I think it was probably something much more extreme than that. And then later in the movie, he's saying the uncle sees him again and is like, I can't loan you the money because I talked to your dad. And he was, I don't know, it was something about the way he said, like, you're my favorite, like, nephew or whatever. I don't know. There was just something, their relationship, I just read that as being somehow abusive to Julian in a way that was like, very old and something that Julian didn't even quite understand yet is part of his problem. And then there was also this other aspect to his relationship with Clay where I felt like he was actually interested in Clay
Oh.
sexually. He slept with Blair because he missed Clay.
Yeah.
Because Blair and Julian cheat on Clay with each other. And that's not the deal. And so Clay catches them. That happened at Thanksgiving. Now Clay's back for Christmas. And he forgives them. But I think part of his forgiving them has to do with like that on some level he knows that he's actually the focus of both of their attentions. And the
Yeah.
only reason that they turn to one another is because he's absent.
Yeah, because Jamie Gertz or Blair says, you left the both of us when she's talking to him in the club or somewhere. Like he abandoned them and they were just lost without him. And so they turned to each other for comfort, like you said. Like he was the glue holding the group together and kind of
Mm-hmm.
probably keeping them from going off the rails, it seems like. And then once he left, they lost their stability.
He's the parental figure.
Yes,
Like,
totally.
because while I was watching this movie, I was also wondering about why I just had such a huge, like, take my breath away crush on Andrew McCarthy. Because I'm not normally attracted to guys that look like him. And I also, it's almost like I don't even see his face because I'm just like staring at his eyes, like he's hypnotizing me or something. I think part of it's because he has this really intense paternal vibe to me that he was even conveying in movies as a teenager. And like if you look at other movies that he's in, he always ends up playing somebody that's like the emotionally reserved person that ends up taking care of things.
Yeah,
And
he's really good at that. He's an old soul or something, and it like comes through in the movies. Even though he has a baby face, he's like a baby face with an old soul, and he
yeah,
just has like a presence about him where he does seem like he would take care of things. His
but
eyes, I feel like he has like I go back and forth with him. Like sometimes I think he looks really cute, and then sometimes I think he looks kind of strange. Like his eyes are just kind of wild and almost cross-eyed
creepy.
sometimes. Yeah, I don't know.
I have a theory about, okay, so I have a theory about what this movie is.
Tell me, I love
So,
your theory.
thanks. So, I think this movie is an indictment of Hollywood,
Oh, yeah.
obviously. It's criticizing itself. Now, every once in a while, or quite often, depending on the decade, Hollywood like indicts itself in movies where it's totally self-aware, like Hollywood's self-aware, and they're doing a critique on their own lifestyle. So these movies come out and everybody loves them. Loves them. I love them. Everybody loves a redemption story. So Julian has the potential to have a redemption story like 4 or 5 times over and over and over again.
Ugh, I kept rooting for him.
Well, he's Robert Downey Jr. He's so
Oh, God,
easy to
yeah.
root for.
I love him. He's great.
He has like his face is rounded in such a way that he always looks like a little boy.
Uh-huh.
It's like it's easy to have empathy and want to nurture him, which is why he's like a really great villain.
Yeah. He
Because
lures you in.
I haven't personally been like sexually attracted to him, like probably in any, I don't, he's just not, I'm just not, he's not my jam, you know? But also like, he's a very attractive person.
Yeah,
He's really fascinating to watch.
he
And
is.
he's like unabashedly grotesque in this movie.
I've never felt sexually attracted to him either, but I just feel like he's just so cute and he's just got such a great playful personality that comes through in like every movie and he's like a smartass all the time, but like an endearing smartass. And he's just unapologetic with it. And so yeah, even when he's being like a bad guy or a horrible drug addict, it's like you still just want to be with him and hang out with him and help him. And especially in this movie, it was terrible. Like you said, you can see the pain when he's smoking the crack and you can see that it feels like it's the only thing in his life and just like it seems really genuine and then while I'm watching it I'm like this is genuine like now knowing everything that he went through
Oh.
was
Mm-hmm.
he really going through it at the time of this movie or had he already like recovered and then did this movie and then went back into drugs. I don't know, but like this acting is coming from like a place in reality. You can tell, and it really comes through. And so it's really painful to watch. And the only thing that makes it easier to watch is knowing that he's doing well now, like in real
Yes.
life. But
Oh,
otherwise,
for sure.
it's too painful to think about everything he went through.
If it was like Philip Seymour Hoffman, then I couldn't even watch it. We wouldn't have even watched this movie if there was any other outcome for him
Yeah, it'd be too much. What about
in
River
real life.
Phoenix? Oh God,
I can almost not even watch any River Phoenix
I
because
know.
I had a huge crush on him as well.
Yes, hello, he's gorgeous.
And
Yeah,
to
he had more
every
depth than like normal 80s teenage
uh,
heartthrob people.
that like like there's something like really deeply vulnerable.
Yeah, and especially when you're already like physically attractive and then you have that like inner attractive
Mhm.
quality as well.
Whenever you're a really attractive person and you've also had a lot of like emotional pain in your life, it keeps you from realizing how gorgeous you are physically, and then you don't get cocky. Because there's nothing, well, there's lots of things more obnoxious, but I find personally, I find nothing kills somebody's attractiveness to me quicker than when they're like really, when they really know that they're hot. Like, hey, baby, anybody I walk up to, they're going to be like, look at me, you know? And
Yeah.
that really turns me off. And you know they're bad in bed. Those people are bad in bed, like, because they're
Because they
used
don't
to
feel like they
getting
have to
what they
try.
want. Yeah, they're used to getting what they want. And they literally have just people kind of fawning all over them, being like, yes, I will, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
They're like, who's next? So they don't have to impress the
exactly.
person that they're with in bed because they know there's someone else just waiting. They don't have to put on a good show.
Exactly.
Well, I managed to be extremely attractive and good in bed, so it can be done,
It can
but
be done, but I
most
bet
people can't.
no, but I bet you have a lot of physical pain in your background. Or not physical pain, sorry. I bet you have a lot of emotional pain.
After the sex, there's a lot of physical pain. Yeah, I have emotional pain too. Thanks for bringing it up. So yeah, so that at that point, it's when we're coming back in where it's Christmas. It's only been 6 months since they've been apart, but then they all end up getting back together. So Jamie Gertz or Blair says like, "Are you coming home for Christmas? I really need to talk to you." So he feels like he's going to come back there and get back together with her when he comes home for Christmas after finding her with Julian at Thanksgiving. He's willing to like look past that and forgive her and move on. But then when he gets there, he finds out that really she just wants him to talk to Julian about his drug problem. And then they go out to dinner and they're not really being serious or just having fun. They haven't had like the serious talks about Julian's drug problem yet because he doesn't want to. And he says like to 10 years together, half of our lives. It was kind of a jumble, but maybe they made it that way so we could feel more like Julian, where we just felt like out of control and confused and not really knowing what was going on.
Well, I felt like a lot of the camera angles and the lighting and the motion of the movie was pretty jarring. There was a lot of electrical blue haze that permeates everyone.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone was in like blue light. Like if you're in a dark room, the TV on, like the glow of the television or something, that was on everyone all the time. And then that party that they go to in the beginning, there are like 1,000 little televisions set up throughout the party.
To the point where there's a blackout.
Yeah, that's I have to say, like during the sex scene, so when he does get back together with Blair and they are kind of rekindling their romance and they go back to her loft after they've been out for an evening at the bar and they do have sex. And I feel like it's very conservative sex scenes for this movie. I
It
was really
was
expecting it
great.
to be more gratuitous, but she's basically still wearing her leather jacket while they have sex. And they just show like very strategic things. They don't even show boobs, which is like,
I
what?
was like, there were no boobs in this movie.
An 80s cocaine movie
I
with no
loved
boobs?
it. I loved
What's
it.
happening? Yeah, so it was great. I really liked the way they did the sex scenes because they were like
Mhm.
very conservative, but still, I felt like, I gotta be honest with you, I felt like they were really having sex. Like in the first scene when she was on
Oh
top
my
of him,
God.
I felt like they could really be having sex.
The shot was if you were Clay looking down, laying on your back, looking down at where you're meeting Blair in
Meeting.
the in the, in the erogenous zone of pleasure. So
Yeah.
you kind of see his torso, but you don't really see her. You just see like her leather jacket. And now that we're talking about the women, I mean, there's not that many women in the movie, but the women that are in the movie are all the actual human complex characters. They are allowed to show us that. Blair is really one of the boys. Like she dresses like Clay. When they did go to like they went to that party later when they were looking, when Clay and Blair were looking for Julian after his like, zillionth relapse of smoking crack. And he runs off again and they're looking for him. And then they go to this party that's a tuxedo party. So everyone's wearing a tuxedo. So even the women are wearing tuxedos.
Yeah,
Which
that's very 80s.
that could have been an opportunity though, the party to fill it with scantily clad women and then to show leering shots of their boobs and their butts as, part of like setting the scene for the party, which is like every 80s party shot.
Yeah, like the women could have been wearing only a tuxedo jacket with nothing underneath it and like a bow tie with their boobs and their ass hanging out.
Yeah.
But they weren't. They were wearing conservative clothing. And the
Yeah.
girls were talking about like going to college. He's like, "How's MIT?" And so they were like fun,
Exactly.
normal girls, but they also had like great educations. And yeah,
Yeah.
they did a little coke, but they kept it
Yeah,
together.
they did. And their conversation had nothing to do with men.
Wow. This
It's
is
very
enlightening.
modern.
It is for 1987, definitely.
They were all snorting coke in the bathroom at the tuxedo party. Public Enemy's Fight the Power song was on. And I just thought
Mm,
it was really interesting how they were this like group of white girls snorting coke in the bathroom with that on. There were almost no black people anywhere in this movie, but there was like a lot of rap. And I thought that was kind of gross, but not in a way that was like intentional or anything. It's just a reflection of how things operated.
these white girls are just like snorting coke in the bathroom freely, and then they're going to drive home and they don't have anything to really worry about. And they know that if they do happen to spend one night in jail, someone can bail them out. But if the people who are making that music were caught doing the same thing, they would be in jail for years and possibly get killed when they got pulled over.
I feel like we could talk about the fact that Julian owes Rip $50,000 because he agreed to sell crack for $50,000 or coke or whatever. That he did it all and didn't sell it. Now he doesn't have any money and lost his record label. His dad doesn't trust him. His best friend doesn't trust him. Nobody, trusts him. He has sores on the outside of his mouth and he's very sweaty all the time. And he smells bad. He
Mm-hmm.
probably has like that weird, like medicinal smell that people get when they're just like consumed with like a drug like that. And his uncle refuses him and he goes to Rip and he's like, I don't know, man. And Rip's like, I know.
Because at first, Rip is like, "Oh, yeah, well, that's fine. You don't have $50,000. You can work it off till we're even, Steven." And so, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. thinks that he's just going to be selling drugs for him. And then Rip is like, "Oh, I've got this party you can go to where you can meet these people." So I didn't know what was going to happen at that point. I didn't know. I was getting afraid that he was actually just going to set him up to get like the shit beat out of him or killed or something when he went off. Because then he looked at his like henchmen to take him away. And so yeah, then you see the henchman Bill or whatever, who's Rip's like right hand man, waiting outside the room, and then Robert Downey Jr. just comes out of the seedy motel room, looking shaken and always sweaty. Yes, always very sweaty, disheveled, and he has a shirt on, but he didn't have his jacket on, and then he like puts his jacket on, and he just looks really traumatized, even more than usual. And I was like, okay, I guess something sexual happened in there, but I didn't know exactly for sure because they kind of leave it vague at that point, and then it's clarified more later.
Yes.
He is supposed to be going to like 3 places that night, but after he comes out after the first encounter, then he escapes and then is hiding from Rip because he cannot go through that again. It was too traumatic for him.
And the guy, Billy, I think his name, who's like his handler, he's like, we've got like 3 more places to go, which means that he's going to be sexually violated and abused 3 more times that night. And God knows what ways.
Yeah, and who knows how many people are at each of those 3 places.
Exactly.
Like 5 guys at each place.
Yeah, it's totally horrifying.
Ugh.
It really amazed me because you almost never see a man being sexually abused on screen.
No, you really don't. And that's why I was just so surprised at like the depths that this movie went to. They didn't keep it real superficial, like, oh, I do drugs and I have rich families, they can just get me out of these problems. It's like, no, he is in it alone and he's in too deep. No one trusts him anymore. Everyone's tried to help him so many times and they don't believe that he'll really quit. So they've kind of abandoned him and he has nothing. He has no money. He's losing his friends and he feels helpless and he feels like he doesn't have any other choice but to go into this trading sex for money and drugs to basically save his life because he's afraid that they'll kill him otherwise. Poor Julian.
I know. So you want to hear my theory?
Yes, I want to hear your theory. I want to hear all your theories.
Okay, okay, I'm trying to like clarify this for myself too, you know. So in Hollywood, we get these movies where Hollywood redeems itself, and it lets us in at what's happening behind the scenes of the movie somehow. I guess like the most extreme example of that would be David Lynch's Mulholland Drive.
I've still never seen it. I need to see it.
In a lot of ways, it might be my favorite David Lynch movie. I guess maybe I resonate with it more than but I'm just a huge David Lynch fan. From way back, as you know.
I need to have like a David Lynch marathon because I've never really seen all of Blue Velvet either, and that's got my boy in it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I saw that way too young.
Yeah, maybe we should put that on our I think it's on our list.
Yeah, I think
you
so.
Put it on our list. I'll do it.
Okay.
I can handle some.
It's a wild
It's
a wild ride.
Oh my God.
I'm still not getting to my theory, am I?
Well, we keep getting sidetracked. Now we're talking about him. I'm like twirling my hair like
I know.
5 years old. Oh my God.
As soon as I mentioned him, he started twirling her hair.
Oh my God.
It was adorable. I was like thoroughly enjoying it.
I didn't even realize. It's so embarrassing.
I wonder if she's gonna notice this.
Hey, Cooper.
That's fine. I feel like there's some serious like girl crush energy happening because I'm definitely bringing that to the table.
Yeah, this is a good girl crush day. Your theory.
Okay, the theory. Okay. Julian everyone is offering him an opportunity to stop doing drugs. And he keeps failing them. Then it's much like how whenever we go to a movie, we end up being extremely disappointed by the generic tropes that Hollywood continually throws at us. And in the 80s, you didn't have a choice. Obviously now with streaming services, everything's like completely changed. And Hollywood has basically died the way that Julian ends up dead in the desert at the end of the movie, which is to say that Julian is Hollywood. And this movie is an indictment on the excesses of the movie industry in the 80s and the schlock that they were constantly throwing at people, where it was like blatant propaganda to buy more shit.
Buy more cocaine.
I mean, I don't know. Does that even make any sense?
It does, because so it's coming upon like the end of the 80s, and they've already been through like the real height of it, like the Reagan 80s, and super coked up. So yeah, I can see that. They're kind of like, okay, we have done it. We've gone all out. We've debauched everything. The 80s are almost over. We're moving into a new era. Like, maybe it's time to move on. The Brat Pack kids are now like growing up. They're moving on to other things. Like, it's time to close out this chapter. Yeah, and talking about how the fact that Hollywood had on children, like child actors. So this is like a good representation of that. And then it shows like the tragic ending. Keep going with this.
I like this, what you're bringing up about the way that child actors are treated.
Yeah, and I think especially, I mean, I'm sure it's not good now either, because look at most child actors. They end up on a somewhat sad path, and it doesn't work out well for a lot of them. And I think especially like in the 70s and 80s, that was true, because during that time, even regular kids were kind of treated like adults, like older than they were. They were left to their own devices, left alone quite often. And if you're a child actor, you already have a job when you're like 7, you know? So if you're already in this generation where people treat kids like adults, if you have a job when you're 7 or 8, they're going to treat you even more like an adult. And they're going to let you do what you want because they want to keep you happy, because they want to keep you working. So you can get away with a lot of things. You're not getting the guidance that you need. No one's telling you no. And that can be a dangerous thing. Like, it sounds fun, but after a while, it's not fun. And especially when you're so young, you need someone to like tell you no and protect you, really. Even though you feel like you're an adult, you're not. And even though you're a big movie star, you're still just a kid. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, like it's come out, a lot of them were like sexually abused by people in the industry as well. And they were exposed to like drugs and alcohol, probably as part of that abuse to get them to go along with it and to help keep them quiet and keep them under their control.
Just like Julian.
Yeah, just like Julian. So yeah, Julian can just be maybe like the poster boy for 80s child movie stars.
That's a good point. I'm so discombobulated by being in this closet.
I'm sitting on the floor.
It's like, it's really made me feel kind of weird. And the movie discombobulated me too. Also, because I've been on cocaine before. Ooh. I have not ever smoked anything like that. And the way that I did the cocaine was very controlled. Like, because I'm not silly. I know what happens to people. Like, that's a legitimate thing of what happens to Julian with cocaine. That happens to people all the time. And I mean, also, I was exposed to this movie when I was a kid. So it's pretty well seared into my. Also, never do heroin because, you know, but obviously
that's just good advice.
But But I thought like a controlled amount of cocaine would be okay. I was like, Sigmund Freud does it.
Oh, he did.
If it's
Well,
good
if he
enough
did
for
it,
if it's good enough for Siggy, it's good
oh
enough
my
for
God.
me. So I actually did think
You use that as like a justification.
See? Well, okay, here's the thing. I was reading a lot of Sigmund Freud at the time, and I knew about his life, and I knew that he used cocaine. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. I want to do that. I guess it's sort of like a musician who looks at like rock and rollers and are like, oh, they do heroin. I'm going to try that. You know, maybe I think maybe it was a little bit of that for me. I thought, oh, Coke can be a tool for being more intellectual. What I quickly realized though is that cocaine is responsible for disco and really terrible renditions of Art Deco furniture from the 80s and like rehashes of 60s pop art.
And
So
the Star Wars Christmas special, I've heard that cocaine was highly involved in that. The Chewbacca themed Christmas special.
gosh, I didn't see that.
I've never seen it. I've only just heard lore of it, and I kind of want to see it. But apparently, it is like a cocaine fever dream
Oh my
with
gosh.
Chewbacca in the middle.
So I had a pact with a couple of friends, and so we would do it together on the weekends. And one of our rules was that we went in on it together. It was a small amount. We only did it on the weekend in that one setting. Like
Wow.
because it's really addictive. Like no
I've
duh.
heard.
Like that's not propaganda.
Yeah.
So we're like, we agreed on that, But much like I hear what happens with like swingers, somebody doesn't follow the rules. And one of my friends couldn't help himself and he loved it too much and ended up getting super addicted to it. And
Oh God.
we watched him spiral. And so I thought about him a lot when I was watching this with Julian because there were some similarities in the way that they felt completely unlovable. And and one of the things about cocaine is that it makes you feel really accepted with like it's really easy to accept and love yourself and be like, I'm fucking awesome. And like we are not taught that.
No, that would be great to just feel that naturally.
And
Well,
we
not naturally,
could.
but
Well, we could, we still
don't.
can. Like
You're
we could,
making me want to try
yeah.
it.
Oh, no, no, no. But there's way better ways to do that
Okay.
than Coke. I mean, it doesn't last at all. And then whenever you come down off of it, it's like you feel
Do we need another
crappier.
bump?
Yeah, the problem with it is that, okay, so you start off at like this level where maybe things aren't great. Like maybe you don't feel super great all the time, but you don't feel super horrible all the time either. So that's pretty good. And then you do Coke. And then you're like, oh, I am fucking hot. I am brilliant. I am a piece of work. And I'm going to work it all over town.
Oh my.
Baby. Whatever that means to you, whatever kind of work you do, you get really confident. And then the high wears off. And then you feel terrible because you're coming down off of it. And I don't really know the chemical. Yeah, then you feel like crap. You're hungover.
Yeah, that's the bad part.
And then you go, well, I know what I could do to feel better. But see what I would do. So it's really easy to just go back to it. But I'd make sure that I would do like really tiny amounts in shorter times. So I never felt extremely high. but I never felt extremely low either. I'll probably cut that out because it's actually a really great way to do coke.
Yeah.
And not like get hooked on it. Because I never had that when I was off of it, I didn't crave it. Because what I was trying to do was I wanted to sharpen my perception in a particular way that was like more mathematical.
Did it help for them?
Whereas it's like psychedelics are very spiral. Like if I was gonna say they were a shape, they'd be very, very much a spiral experience. But cocaine and coca, because I've actually done coca leaves where you stick coca leaves in your jaw
Okay.
and you
I've seen
just
that on
leave it
TV.
there.
Oh, you don't chew it, you just leave it.
No, it's
Chew it, you'll like
incredible.
have a heart attack and die probably or
Mm,
something.
no, it's super mild.
Oh, okay.
It's unbelievable.
You're making
Um,
all these drugs sound so great.
well, I kind
Don't
of
do
think
drugs.
I'm sure I'm going to cut out like all the indulgent parts, but
Yeah.
I think drugs can be very good if they're used in a particular way that's more precise about what your intentions are, and you have like a system in place for things. With coke, so the coca plant generally, since I've done the leaves as well, which is the traditional way of interacting with them. Also drinking a tea. I've also drank the
Hmm.
coca tea. So I feel like the coca plant is more of an experience that would be a lot of right angles.
As opposed to the spiral of psychedelics.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I feel like I could have an addictive personality. Like, I know that there are people in my family who have addictive personalities in some parts of my family, and I'm
Yeah.
afraid that I could have that. And that's why I've never
Yeah.
experimented with drugs because I can just see me like trying cocaine once and then becoming addicted.
You know what? If you feel that way about yourself and you've had those thoughts, then don't ever do drugs.
I
It's that
won't.
fucking simple.
I won't.
There's absolutely no reason for it.
Like, I feel like I'm probably going to get addicted, but I'll just try and see.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I guess I never really felt that about any of the drugs that I've done. Because if I had felt that way about them, I wouldn't have done them. Because I mean, like, I have seen movies like this.
Yeah.
And
So the movies did work, and the Sweet
it
Valley
looked
High book did work.
totally.
Yay. Nancy Reagan would be so happy.
Did you know that she was rumored to be the blowjob queen of Hollywood
What?
back in like the 40s?
Oh my God. What
I
a salacious detail.
love it. It's like the thing about her that I love.
That is shocking. So Reagan, like, nailed that down. Good for him. It's funny because she's so tiny, and I feel like her body was always so skinny, and she was just
Mhm.
like mainly a big head. And so now that all makes sense.
She was she, she was chubby when she was young.
Hmm.
And then developed an eating disorder, I think.
God, did you read like a biography about her?
I started to read the Kitty Kelly biography, the unauthorized biography.
Those are the only
And
kind.
I'll tell you what, Kitty Kelly is a great writer. But then I got distracted and was started reading other things that were like more pertinent to something that wasn't just like salacious gossip about someone I don't like.
I know. I'm like, I don't think you're like a Nancy Reagan fan, so I was just surprised that you had read about her.
Well, see, okay, so you know how people like gossip?
Yes.
I love gossip. I love salacious details, but I only really like to I only enjoy it if it's like about dead people because I don't feel like I'm directing my energy at them. And like with people that are alive, like it feels kind of creepy because I kind of feel like I'm like peering through a window. So I like to read about people that are dead. But I know
Okay.
about all kinds of like random Hollywood scandals of people that have died.
From like the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Those do seem a little just more interesting and glamorous too. And especially
Mhm.
because at that time, anything risque was even more risque because it was such a conservative time. So it does make it a little cooler.
Yeah,
Nancy, who
I
knew?
know. Uh, Less Than Zero has a metallic quality that is like resonates with the blue haze of the late night television on in the dark. All of the decor in the movie is so cold, and it's like all of the furniture has sharp angles and edges. Most of the rooms look like people really don't inhabit the spaces. The ceilings are all very high. And
Yeah, they look like modern art museums, their homes.
yeah, the only cozy place in the whole movie is in Andrew McCarthy's arms.
That's beautiful. Oh, Andrew.
So Clay and Blair had an interaction that I was like, "Oh my gosh, this perfectly sums up to me what I felt like I had to be as a woman." Okay.
Tell me.
So Clay says to Blair, "You don't look happy." And then Blair says, "But do I look good?" And then Clay says, "Always." And I was like, oh my gosh, this completely sums up the way that I thought the path to beauty lies in pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the saying.
And something about pain. Um,
That's funny because I was just reading that quote because I had that written down too. Like, that's a
nice.
powerful moment in the movie that does
Yeah.
kind of sum up a lot of things for a lot of women. So there was one interaction that I thought was weird in the movie.
Yes.
That just seemed like, okay, where does this fit in and why is it in here? When
Mm-hmm.
Robert Downey Jr. is really like at the end of his rope and he's escaped from RIP after he was forced into basically being a sex worker by force. He comes to the Christmas party that Andrew McCarthy's family's having, and he just looks like worse than ever. He looks and he shows up. So they're inside this beautiful dinner in this fancy house, and they're all wearing their beautiful clothing. And then Andrew McCarthy looks out the window and he sees Robert Downey Jr. in his backyard. And it looks like he's a wild animal because he's under a tree, like in the bushes, and he just looks wild eyed and sweaty and disheveled. So he goes out to talk to him. And then they're by the pool. And that's when Robert Downey Jr. comes clean and is like, I owe $50,000 to Rip. I really need your help. And Andrew McCarthy's like, oh my God, like $50,000, that's a lot to ask, but I'll see what I can do. So he goes inside to ask his dad for $50,000. And I was just like, what is that like? What is that like? I mean, I can't even imagine. But
Hey,
so,
Dad.
hey, dad, I need to borrow some money. $50,000.
My best friend
He did
smokes
$50,000 worth of
crack.
coke. But so
Oh,
while that is
geez.
going on, then Julian, somebody goes into the house, and I kind of looked away for a minute, and he ends up, I guess, in like the bathroom, like the mom's bathroom or something, where the little girl is, which I guess is Andrew McCarthy's really a lot younger little sister. So there's like this 7-year-old girl sitting at a vanity, and she's putting on jewelry and like messing with makeup and stuff, and he goes to talk to her, and he's like flirting with her, like how guys do with like little girls,
Yeah.
just
I've had,
innocently teasing,
yeah.
like, oh,
I've
hey, you haven't called me. I haven't heard from you. You're giving me the
Yeah.
cold shoulder.
There were a few times that that happened to me when I was a little girl where it didn't feel creepy at all. I just felt like
Yeah.
they were goofing around with me.
Yeah. So
Like
it
we
can
were
be
just playing a
adorable.
game. Please continue.
I feel like it can be done to where it feels adorable and cute. Because when you're a little girl, you do want, like, you think a
Mm-hmm.
teenage boy is like everything in the world. And so it would feel great to have them pay attention to you and like kind of flirt with you, but not really flirting. And so, yeah, as long as you keep that fine line, it can be very adorable or it can quickly turn creepy. I feel like his was staying adorable and like innocent and not creepy and
Mm-hmm.
funny because that's how he is. But it just felt strange. Just kind of like, what is this scene? Why is it in there? And then I was like, is he going to steal the jewelry that she's trying on? Did he steal it?
Yeah, he steals the jewelry. I felt like that scene was about Julian's further loss of innocence. First, he's playing with this little girl, making her delighted. I mean, she's delighted with his attention. He's like crumbling, you know. And
Yeah.
whenever you go and steal your friend's mom's jewelry, like that's a whole other level that like he's not it's almost like he's not even there anymore. It's just this need for speed.
It's a different movie.
It's so horrible. Like this movie is so sad. So while Julian's stealing uh Clay's mom's jewelry, Clay and Blair are having sex against a wall. And it's interspersed with shots of his dad playing the piano and his dad's new wife and his dad's old wife sitting drinking wine incessantly with that nervous sip that never stops. And I noticed through this movie there's a lot of scenes where people are constantly have a habit of consumption, consuming something, and they'll like focus in on it. You know, like how Julian's smoking his pipe, and then how these women are drinking, and how Blair is also like constantly taking little bumps of Coke. That has to do with like being a consumer. Look at all of this stuff that you think you need. You're emotionally absent from the people in your life and from yourself. You have no idea that you can nourish yourself by breathing and sitting outside by a tree. All of the people in the movie, really except for Clay, are like motivated by consuming something outside of themselves because they feel really empty. Hollywood has fed that. That's its job. Besides entertaining and like also like just people needing to create things out of like pure beauty of consciousness, you know. But somebody's got to pay the bills. So I guess that's further reason why I feel like this movie is like an indictment.
The excess, it's never enough. You have to always be consuming something to try to fill a void. But you can't. So you're just
Yeah.
trying to keep filling it with more and more and more. But it doesn't go away, just like
Yeah.
Julian had. One of the scenes, so the scene where he was with that little girl also had an interesting quote when he calls her a heartless preteen hussy. I was like, that
Oh.
might be getting a little close to the edge with like a 7-year-old girl, but just wanted to throw that
I
quote in there.
I had written that's funny because I had written down you little vixen, which is pretty gross.
Yeah, those are gross.
I feel like he passed over the line that I was comfortable with when he brought those words in. It became menacing, but I think it had to become menacing. He was he was there to steal the jewelry.
Yeah, but I think that it was supposed to like still just show that he was still like a good-hearted, fun person. Like he was trying to just be cute and funny with her while he was really there to steal jewelry. So it
But
was like juxtaposing
yeah.
the good side and the bad side that he's been forced into.
hmm You can't help but be menacing when you're that desperate. Even if you have no bad intentions of ever hurting anybody, when somebody's like so desperate for a substance, and not only is he desperate for the substance that kind of like takes over your body and your mind, and a body snatcher. My friend that happened to, that got addicted, he became a different person and he wasn't himself. It was so creepy. That was like the most horrible thing as a witness. You start to realize that they're not them anymore.
That's
And
sad.
and that's not like to say that that's always going to be that way. But while they're on the drug, while they're in the grips of the drug, they aren't themselves.
Right.
And it's creepy to be around. It's so creepy.
Yeah, because they look the same, but they're not the same. That's sad too. So what happened to your friend? Like, how did it end up?
Well, I lost contact with him because I just couldn't handle it. And he went into rehab, and when he came out, and we, supported him totally with that. And when he came out, he gave the thing of, how he was going to be and all that. And then I was gone, and I for a few months, and I came back and I went to a party that he was having,
Mm.
and he had gotten his life together. And then sure enough, that night, about, about midnight rolls around, and who shows up but a drug dealer with a big bag of coke.
At his party?
He called him.
Oh God.
And so I
Was it
took
like his
him.
I'm going back on Coke party? Why did he
I
have like
guess
all these
it
people
was.
over to do it?
It was such a mind fuck to me
Yeah.
because I really believed him. And then I saw it happening though at the party. Like I saw why it happened. And it was because the guy that he liked, that he had invited to the party, just like came, but wasn't, was only interested in friendship. So he got rejected. And I saw that happen earlier in the evening, and that's not great. And then I know that's why, because, and then, it makes you feel really confident, and it fills in all those little spots where you feel deficient. Like all those little spots where whenever you're like at a party, you like look around and like compare yourself to other people. It like takes all that away.
Hmm.
And the problem though is that the more you do it, the more like drained and weird looking you get. so so you might feel like you're on top of the world and looking fine, but everybody else around you is kind of like, what's going on over there?
And why is your nose always bleeding? That's sad. That sounds like the plot of a movie. Like this sounds like it's from the movie that
Yeah.
he's like at a party, everything's going great, but then you get rejected and boom,
Yeah.
you're right back
It's
on.
just right enough, and
Mm-hmm.
and I really didn't want him to have a party. Like, I didn't tell him that, of course, because you can't tell an adult person. That's not my job. I'm not going to be that person that
No,
tells
and like you
another
can't keep him
person
from
what
having a
to
party
do.
for the rest of his life, you know? Like he's
It's
got
not,
to try it
yeah,
sometime.
ultimately it's not my business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't say anything. Like more people came over than I thought were going to be there though too. And then I was like, "Oh no, now it's getting like, I know exactly what his triggers are because I've been with him so many times when he's been so high where it's like an alien came in and your friend isn't in your friend's body anymore, and it's rather disconcerting. um
Sure. I can imagine.
And this is like stuff that I'm thinking, like, even times when I had like taken a few bumps of coke or something, and I would be out dancing with him, and so I myself would be kind of high. I'm like looking at him being like, dude, you're not even here. Like, where are you? Like Julian, like Robert De Niro played that so
Or
well.
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert De
Can,
Niro. Oh my God.
can you imagine Robert De Niro playing Princess Andrew McCarthy and Jamie Gertz as a spoiled Beverly Hills teen? I would love to see that.
Oh my God. This is hilarious.
God, that'd be a totally different movie and a totally amazing movie.
I want to see this now. I want to see them. I want to reboot.
Oh.
God, I don't even remember what I was saying. That was so funny. Oh yeah, so Robert Downey Jr., I just felt like he wasn't in his body. And it just felt like how, seeing like my friend be all sweaty and knowing that he's been up for 3 days.
Oh my God.
And then like being like twitchy and stuff. And then being like, hey, you want to eat? And he's like, oh no, I just ate. And like knowing that he hasn't eaten. Just like the constant like lying. But you can't help it because you're not telling yourself the truth. So how do you expect to be telling other people the truth?
Yeah, I think he played it so well because it's based on his experience.
What's your favorite quote?
I mean, honestly, my favorite quote, I just wrote down what you said earlier about when they were talking and you said, "You don't look happy." And she said, "But do I look good?" And then I wrote down "You're a heartless preteen hussy" that he said to like a 7-year-old girl.
What's funny is that Nana's called me a hussy before.
And she's not wrong.
Thank you. Well,
I like
you.
that word. I think it's kind of an endearing term.
I do too. My favorite is, well, you're fucked up. You look like shit, but hey, no problem. All you need is a better cut of cocaine.
Yes.
When Clay said that to Blair. Because Blair is like so obnoxious in the first half of this movie. She reminds me of Winnie on the Wonder Years, like in the sense of it's that same character of like, I'm just completely unaware of the fact that I'm hurting everyone's feelings and I'm going to make myself be the one that's so distraught and the damsel in distress. But like she's actually causing all of it. And so that's really annoying to me to watch in like a movie and then to not have the character like develop, which I feel like on the Wonder Years, like I feel like Winnie didn't really develop very well past that. But anyway, that's not really. But I feel like with Blair, she actually, her character develops a lot through the movie. She becomes somebody that I really enjoy spending time with. I like whenever Clay and Rip get in a fight at the party and Blair is hitting Rip and Billy, the bodyguard or whatever, the henchman, every time she can. And she's just like right in there. Like there's a bunch of guys standing around and they're not doing anything.
I know. The whole time I was like, is anyone going to join in here? The room is literally filled with people. They have to move out of the way to avoid getting hit by like flying bodies and shitty art that's flying around. And no one lifts a finger. They're just watching. Yeah, it was awesome that Blair jumped in and tried fighting them off too, because they were wanting to go after Julian, who was like just waiting alone out in the car, passed out, and because they had just rescued him from the hotel where he had been forced again into basically selling his body in exchange for money and coke to pay off Rip. But Clay, I keep forgetting his name now too. I knew it at the beginning. Clay goes back into the art gallery tuxedo museum party, whatever they're having, to get Blair and bring her back out to the car to let her know that he's rescued Robert Downey Jr. Forgetting everyone's name. And then somehow, like, at the same time that he gets there, then Rip and Bill are there too, which they had been at the hotel previously where they had forced Robert Downey Jr. into like being a sex worker. And they get there though at the same time. So they have that big fight. I mean, Andrew McCarthy, I'm sorry, but I don't see him winning any fight. So he definitely needed
No,
help. And it's good that Blair,
definitely.
and finally they were able to escape. And I think he took like a big glass rod that was part of the art display or something and just bashed him
Yeah.
across the face with it. Oh, and then his head got slammed in. Andrew McCarthy's head got slammed into one of those televisions and like cracked the TV set. Which the TVs all around were like a huge theme of the whole thing. So then maybe that's another just like symbolic thing of Hollywood just admonishing itself. Symbolics. Symbology.
Symbolic.
Is that a word?
That should be.
I'll look it up later.
Synergy through symbolics.
It's like remind me of Dianetics.
Yeah, exactly.
Those commercials that used to be on. I remember seeing Dianetics commercials when I was a kid. Like on, yeah, the big volcano erupting is like Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. And they sold it as if it were just like a novel or something, like a Tom Clancy book. And then now I'm like, okay, why was that just advertised on TV?
When I was a kid, I remembered asking Nana if I could get that book. Because
Can you imagine?
because I liked the volcano
It's
that
a cool
erupts
commercial.
on it. I was like, that looks interesting. I was like 11, I think. And
Yeah.
She goes, Holly, that's a cult. You
Oh,
don't want, she goes, you don't want anything to do with it, trust me. And she never would be like that. Usually she would like explain something to me. And
yeah.
so I was kind of like, whoa, that must be serious because like she never does that. So but
That's amazing.
then I found one in a Goodwill
Hmm.
and when I was like 14 and I bought it as a joke because I looked at it and like was reading it in the store and I was like, this is a bunch of gobbledygook.
God. Yeah,
But I bought it anyway, just like to show her like this
of
joke.
course. Amazing. Imagine if you had just like ordered it yourself without telling her when you were like 11 and then you became an 11-year-old Scientologist. You're like, I'm sorry, I've got to move out.
I would have
I'll
I would
never
have
see you again. I'm joining Sea Org.
given David Miscavige a run for his money.
Yeah. Yeah, you can be running it by now if you had joined when you were 11.
Damn it.
Yeah, those commercials were on during like Saturday morning cartoons. I swear, I saw them at my grandma's all the
Yeah.
time while I was watching TV.
It must be geared towards me. It must be for me. It wasn't on during the Equalizer.
One of the other just random scenes in the movie that I think kind of goes along with our whole theme, especially from the 80s movies of parental absence,
Yes.
is after after his name's not Clary. Oh my God. After Clay comes back for his Christmas vacation and he goes to that first party where he hooks up with Robert Downey Jr. and Jamie Gertz that night, and then they all go out and Robert Downey Jr. Julian ends up getting like extra effed up later that night, and he separates from them, and then you find him like the next morning sleeping on a park bench, and Andrew McCarthy's gone looking for him, and he's like, I figured I'd find you here. I guess that's happened before. So, but he walks through toward the park bench, and he walks like between these two swings on a swing set, and there's just a little boy swinging there alone with like no one around in the morning in a park. And I was just like, where's that kid's anyone? He's just been swinging for who knows how long, looking at a guy that's passed out on a bench alone in a park. And
Yeah.
that seems
Well, and it's another juxtaposition between this innocent child and Julian, who is lost his way. He's lost his way out of boyhood. Like, right at the cusp of becoming a man, Julian decides he doesn't know how to, I mean, he doesn't decide. It's like he doesn't know how to be a man because he's clearly in a lot of pain. And he's self-medicating to an extreme, on top of the fact that, like, he's just ingesting a physically addictive substance.
yeah,
You
he's
know,
afraid to move on and become a man. And he says, like, while they're having that conversation on the bench with the um abandoned little boy still swinging in front of them, he's like, oh, I went back by the school just to check it out. And it's like, it's only been 6 months. And he's like, just to take a walk down memory lane. And he said, like, oh, it's strange how all the little kids have grown up now and they don't look up to us like they used to. Like, we're legends. And so he's clearly already like longing for high school again, and he just got out of it. He's not ready to move on. Just like Blair's not ready to move on. She doesn't have like whatever skills she needs. She's afraid to leave and go to college. And she's kind of embarrassed to admit that she's really just afraid and maybe she won't make it. And she's doesn't probably have a lot of life skills or coping skills to be able to go somewhere else where she doesn't know anyone and really just make it on her own and test herself. Blair, like we said, Blair and Julian are just kind of trapped there, like in perpetual adolescence, and their father figure, Clay, left them, and they are just kind of floating at sea, lost until he comes back. And then they latch on to him to help them out of all their problems for like his Christmas vacation. He's like, I'm trying to take a vacation here, and I'm suddenly solving all of my friends' problems and getting in fights with drug dealers and watching you OD and watching you go through detox and then watching you die all within a Christmas vacation.
So Julian dies while they're driving through the desert.
They're in Joshua Tree.
So Clay is driving, Julian's sitting in the middle, and then Blair's on the passenger seat. And they're driving through Joshua Tree. Clay all of a sudden realizes that Julian is dead.
Yeah, so it was after they had just rescued him from the hotel and like the fight with Rip and everything. So Julian was really on his like last redemption tour where he was like clean. He had made the deal with his dad that he was going to stay clean for at least a week so he could come home for a while. His dad was eventually going to give him the money. And he went to Palm Springs under the misguided notion that he could just talk to Rip and explain everything, that this time I'm really clean and this time I really mean it and this time I'll pay you. And then, you know, we get the backstory from Rip that this has happened many, many, many times before, just like with so many addicts who really try, but then they just get sucked back in. And he thinks he's going to be able to just like reason his way out of it with Rip, but then Rip forces him into giving more blowjobs for money at that party. And he doesn't want to do it, obviously. And so then the henchman, Bill, lights up like a crack pipe or cocaine pipe or whatever it is we've decided they're doing right in front of him. And so it's like, okay, you're lighting this in my face. I'm just newly clean. I can't resist this. And I have to do this because if I'm going to go in there and be forced to like blow guys in exchange for money, I can't do that sober. So then they just draw him right back in. But then he gets rescued out of there by Clay. And it seems like they're all going to be happy. They're driving out of Palm Springs in their red Corvette Stingray convertible 1964
One of my
tires,
dream
which
cars.
I love so much. Yeah, so it's like, okay, he's got his friends. They're all supporting him now. He's back on track while they're driving home. he's sleeping in between them, like you said. And I'm like, wow, he's sleeping sitting straight up. All right, I don't think I could do that. And then he falls over onto Clay, and then Clay realizes he's dead. So then he pulls over. Yeah, so they're in the middle of Joshua trees, surrounded by all those amazing trees in the middle of the desert, and Clay starts crying a little bit, and then Blair wakes up and she realizes what's going on. And it seems sometimes like when you look at Andrew McCarthy, like he's kind of laughing a little bit when he's crying. Was that just me? I'm
He
like,
could go
maybe it's just
either
like a
way.
nervous laugh that he has, like how some people can't handle like strong emotions and pain and sadness, and
Yeah,
it makes him have like just a like nervous laugh. And I think he had
right.
that.
I read it like whenever this happens to me, when you have a really bad day, everything that you're trying to do is you have some roadblock in front of you. At some point, for me, I'm like, well, why not sooner? Just be like, this is absurd. Like, I
Yeah.
give in. Like, I'm just going to expect everything to be weird from here on out. Thank you very much. Whatever, I'm gonna giggle about it. Now that's like a mild version, but think about everything he's been through with Julian. I could see myself being like, of course you would fucking die
Yeah.
right next to me in a car while we're in the desert and it's 1987. So I just kept thinking about like the drive
I
back.
was thinking that this was like his practice role for Weekend at Bernie's.
Oh my god. It's amazing.
Did they not learn CPR in the 80s? Like they could have at least tried to
Yeah.
resuscitate him. He's young. I've seen people come back after resuscitation like literally 4 times in a
Whoa.
row and walk out of the hospital the next day. Yeah, it was a guy in his 20s on meth and
Wow.
he died. He had to be resuscitated multiple
Damn.
times within a day. And then the next day he like walked out like nothing.
Wow. I had a runner-up favorite quote from Rip. I don't want to trust you. I just want my $50,000.
That's reasonable.
I think you tell yourself that that you're going to stop, but you know you're not going to stop because you still want to, there's a party that still wants to do it. And
Yeah.
so there's like a teetering. I mean, everybody's tried to give up something that they weren't successful giving up like, it's bad for you. I feel like everybody knows what this feeling is, whether it's like a food item or, you know, shopping or drugs or, I don't know, the internet or social media or whatever, like
Yeah.
whatever your fix is, like it feels like a battle when you want to quit it, but you still enjoy it. The other thing with getting in a situation like Julian is that whenever you do progressively worse things, that you feel progressively worse about yourself. And you also know that the people that you love don't want to be around you. That must feel so horrible. There must be so much guilt there. So it just like compounds upon itself. And so the thing that you already had a crutch with, you're going to keep doing it because that was already the thing that you used to make yourself feel better so that you could avoid all this unpleasant emotion stuff in the first place. And so I think that's like a really big part of why that's just a very vicious cycle.
The other thing I was thinking too about whether or not he would stay clean, um, because he, like you said, he had been forced to do things like he'd gone to the lowest of the low, and then he'd been forced to go back into like trading sex for money or drugs again.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I feel like that might be something that would be hard for him to get out of his brain, and that might drive him back to it. And then also knowing that Clay had come in and rescued him from that room. So then he was like shamed in front of his friend, and then he might not be able to get over that. And even though his friend is there to help him and wouldn't judge him, it would always be in the back of his mind, and he would maybe start pushing Clay away and like resenting him because he knew his like deepest, darkest secret. At least he died with his friends in a nice place.
Yeah. There's nothing shameful about being raped, and I don't
No.
think there's anything shameful about being addicted to drugs either. But he's ashamed in the movie, and everything in our culture said if you are raped, if you're a drug addict, you should be ashamed and you should be punishing yourself constantly. That you need to be paying a penance. So if the culture was open and like acknowledging Julian's pain that created the need for smoking crack, if he got into drugs and he was getting raped, there wouldn't be shame in it because our culture would look at something like that and say that's rape. But Rip has actually manipulated Julian to be indebted, and it made me think that this was definitely not just the beginning of the sex for in exchange to pay off the debts. It made me think that it's happened before. I thought that Rip probably operates with that way with a lot of guys.
So after the funeral of Julian, and Clay and Blair are sitting on the bench talking and just reminiscing about him, and then eventually Clay says, I'm leaving tomorrow to go back to school, and I want you to come with me. And she says, I will go. I do want to go with you. So do you think she really goes through with it and goes with him?
Blair has changed. And there's a scene where she's at the tuxedo party with her friends, and her friends are, they like doing coke and stuff, and she's just like, meh. And you can tell she's turned off by it. Then one of the girls' noses starts to bleed. She just laughs it off, and she's like, ha ha, rusty pipe.
Yeah.
And it's so sad because, it's like I'm very aware this whole time that these kids are supposed to be 18. They all seem like kind of jaded in that moment, and that it's not fun. And you can see Blair having this realization that like it's time to give this up. For these Hollywood kids, this is what being a teenager is. These are the childish things that you give up. It's pretty alarming. But like, how could that not happen when you have like so much disposable income and no parental supervision? That's all I got, man. I need some coffee.
Okay.
I need to get out of this closet.
Yeah, you need to come out of the closet. It's too dark in there. It's killing your vibes.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all we had to say about this movie. So for this episode, we just want to ask if anything like this has ever happened to you. Has a friend ever betrayed you? If so, tell us about it at coveryoureyes.podcast@gmail.com. Also, if you have ideas for other movies we should cover in the future, we'd love to hear those too.
Thank you for listening to Cover Your Eyes podcast. If you like their show, please feel free to count the ways. Find us on patreon.com/Cover Your Eyes.
You can also visit our store on Redbubble at Cover Your Eyes Podcast. Are we going to say see you next Tuesday still?
Okay, we could say bye, y'all. See you next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay. The only cozy place in the whole movie is in Andrew McCarthy's arms.